Welcome one and welcome all to the PFN Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Tate. You can find me over at Derek Tate NFL over on X. That is the one and only Kyle Soppe. You can find him over at Kyle Soppe PFN. And we're joined by the one and only Theo Ash. And you can find him over at Theo Ash NFL over on X, formerly known as Twitter. We are through all but one game of the Week 2 slate. I am in need of a Monday Night Miracle or two, gentlemen. I don't know how you're feeling about it, Soppe. We didn't get our DFS contest in. So, I mean, if you didn't check that out last week, you need to do so. But we'll have to, move it to next week, Soppe. We all know I would have won anyway.
I don't know. We'll share some screenshots on Thursday here. Your boys' fantasy or DFS lineup really printed money this week, so we're looking good there, and we'll keep going though. We're going to carry the momentum into a big week 3.
Theo, I don't know about you. It was at times it was tough to watch that Sunday night matchup between the Houston Texans and the Chicago Bears. Particularly, the Chicago offense is getting more and more difficult to watch as Caleb Williams is experiencing some growing pains. But sometimes I got to go on and kind of admit that Nico Collins kind of looks like the guy there in Houston.
He's so good. He is so good.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen the Bears maybe put Jalen Johnson just a little bit more on Nico Collins when he started to torch it, but we didn't see it happen. But certainly the Houston Texans rolling to 2-0 over the Chicago Bears. Bears got to show a little bit more signs of life, but we'll jump into some news and notes. And Theo, I am going to throw it to you first when it comes to this Miami offense, because obviously on Thursday Night Football, we saw, a scary moment with Tua Tagovailoa actually lowered his shoulder into Damar Hamlin, ended up suffering a concussion, which is, I believe, the third documented concussion of Tua Tagovailoa's NFL career, which means we're going to probably see Skylar Thompson under center at least for week 3, if not a little bit longer. So, Theo, when it comes to the injury to Tua, what are your thoughts as the fantasy outlook for this Miami offense with obviously some big names like Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle?
I mean, it's bad. I think that there's a real chance we see Skylar Thompson the rest of the way. I think the Dolphins have a very tough choice to make. I know McDaniel says that it's Tua's decision whether he comes back or not. I could totally see a world where Tua wants to, but I think at some point you get to the point as a team where he's a risk to have him under center. Do they want him back? I think is another question that should be asked, not just does he want to come back. As a team, can you take on that risk? So Skylar Thompson has really been a downgrade whenever they've had to put him in, and they have really struggled to win games and move the ball. I was hyping up all the Dolphins this offseason, and I have a lot of them, and I'm not feeling too good about it. I'm not feeling too good about how they can put up offense with Thompson under center, because they've never been able to really do it before, and I think that it would make the most sense to me to have Thompson in there long term, or Huntley, who they just picked up as a practice squad guy. We'll see who wins that battle kind of here on the fly, but sure. It couldn't be worse. It could not be worse.
Well, a lot of this offense, and folks can try to label players like Tua Tagovailoa or Brock Purdy as system quarterbacks who benefit greatly from obviously nice offensive schematic plans and also excellent talent on the perimeter, Soppe. But when you remove Tua's ability to throw with anticipation over the intermediate part of the football field, which I haven't seen from Skylar Thompson through his NFL career, haven't seen much of that from Tyler Huntley either. This does worry me a little bit, Soppe, when it comes to the fantasy floor that we can expect from Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I understand Mike McDaniel is a great offensive mind. It makes me feel encouraged that Devon Achane will still be able to give us some nice performances, but I do worry about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and I don't know if they're necessarily automatic top 10 plays, and Waddle more so in the top 20 conversation on a weekly basis while Tua is out of the lineup.
Yeah, given the depth of the position, I think there's a real chance that Waddle's no longer a fantasy starter, let alone top 20 guy. Tyreek Hill, he's going to be there because you've got one play potential. Waddle has that, but just not the same. I mean, you talk about going from Tua, just inherently switching quarterbacks is a problem, but now switching styles. Like if we end up with going with Huntley, that's a different skill set altogether. Tua's left-handed. You're flipping the entire offense, the playbook of everything. None of this tracks well for me. And if you were looking at the Dolphins, you were looking at them in spite of a tough finishing kick to the season here. They get, during the fantasy Super Bowl, the last 2 weeks of the seasons, you get the 49ers and the Browns. So you were kind of going to be skeptical there with if they were at full strength. And I don't think, like what Theo's saying, we can't pencil that in. I'm not counting it out, but there's no way you can possibly count on Tua at this point. So Tyreek's an underwhelming version of himself, and Waddle's on the flex conversation at best right now.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a downgrade for me at the wide receiver position, just until we see what this offense looks like. Certainly, Waddle, it's no diss to Waddle or Tyreek Hill. It's just, when you remove the league's leading passer last year from this offense, there's going to be some sort of negative impact, I believe, on the pass catchers who benefited greatly from Tua under center there in Miami. We'll move to Kansas City, another high-powered offense that has had some movement over the last week. We had Isaiah Pacheco, Theo, with a fractured fibula being further evaluated for potential ligament damage. Obviously, the Chiefs' leading ball carrier and kind of feature back in Kansas City over last season, and certainly through the first 2 weeks of the 2024 NFL season. So now we need to have a conversation about Carson Steele or anybody else on that Chiefs roster. But also Hollywood Brown surprisingly ruled out for the year, had further complications on his original injury that now he's on IR, and we expect Xavier Worthy to probably be a bigger part of this offense from the jump than, being ramped up and maybe used in certain packages. So what are your thoughts on this Kansas City offense as a whole, and maybe start with the backfield with Pacheco's injury?
I think that it's starting to get a little bit concerning. Kelsey hasn't done too much so far this season. He's getting older and older and older. So the fact that you've got that on top of everything else just makes you wonder just how high powered this offense actually is and how much different it is than last year when they really struggled to put together explosive plays. I think that any new running back in this system, though, is a very interesting play for fantasy because they have really embraced the heavier personnels going under center. This is who they've kind of been over the past couple of years, and especially this year with Hollywood out, it's 2 tight end sets constantly, and that lends itself to keeping the ball on the ground. So they do have kind of their backup, Pacheco and Carson Steele, very, very similar stylistically. I think that the most likely thing to do is pick him up, and the promotion comes from within the building. They've been giving him the ball in huge situations these past 2 weeks. Yeah. Huge situations to put the game away versus the Bengals. What are they doing? They're handing the ball to Carson Steele. Last week, same thing. He got tackled for a loss in a big moment against the Ravens. Now, that's not good when he's getting tackled for losses, but I think that because they're leaning on him in those big moments, they'll lean on him now that Pacheco is out. And he's got an opportunity to really do something. He does, because this Chiefs offense needs a spark. It needs a weapon, and it's not going to be playing 11 personnel, shooting the ball down the field constantly like maybe we thought.
Yeah, I'm going to probably put Carson Steele as definitely the priority add from this backfield. Soppe probably, maybe just being the leading ball carrier in this Kansas City offense, probably warrants somewhere around low-end running back 2 consideration, I would imagine, correct? I mean, I don't know if I'm not going to go as bullish and say he's automatically going to replace what we saw from Pacheco and put him in like a top 12 consideration, but certainly I think he could slide in as a running back 2 option, if not a flex option for week number 3.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a one-to-one replacement. Sometimes we see that at the running back position where they come in, like in San Francisco, it's Jordan Mason, and it turns out his role is 97% what Christian McCaffrey's was, and we're on our way. I don't think that's going to be the path here because you've got Patrick Mahomes. Like, you've got a guy to bail you out here. I think everybody in this backfield, quite frankly, right now is worth an add. That includes CEH, who's out another few games, because who knows? He's at least got reps as a running back 1 in this league. I get that he hasn't been efficient, hasn't really been effective for a few years here, but why not? Carson Steele, like you said, getting the valuable carries and not making the most of them, that's a good way to lose value here. Samaje Perine still getting worked into this offense, so a little bit more work, but still an ancillary back at best. He's not going to be the bell cow, so I think you're looking at CEH probably in the long term Carson Steele to finish September. But yeah, I would add any Chief running back right now that's on the wire.
Worth a speculative ad for sure. And you mentioned that 1-for-1 replacement. Some jabroni had Jordan Mason as a top 10 play at running back this week, expecting that the Minnesota Vikings could give up some yardage. They did, but yeah, kind of surprising. The Minnesota Vikings actually pulled off the win against the San Francisco 49ers. How about that? Sam Darnold under center. So we have a lot to get to on this episode. If you have not done so, go ahead, subscribe, hit the like button, all that stuff. Make sure that you allow yourself to be notified every single time we drop a new bit of video content here on the Pro Football Network YouTube channel. We got to get to the rookie pass catchers because, Soppe, it was a monster day for a lot of rookie pass catchers. After a slow week 1, we saw Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., Brock Bowers, and even to a lesser extent, Brian Thomas Jr. all have solid fantasy outings north of 10 fantasy points in full PPR formats. So I'm not sure who impressed you the most or potentially saw their stock rise in week number 2, but kind of give me your thoughts on some of these impressive performances from rookie pass catchers in week 2.
Yeah, it's a weird spot. We were kind of in the spot after week 1 where it's like, how good are the Bucs? They just ripped apart the Commanders, and like, that's great and everything. You did what you're supposed to, but how high do we elevate you? It's kind of the same thing for Malik Neighbors and the Giants. I don't think the Giants are going to be playing in a ton of competitive games these days. So that's going to change things, game script, all yada, yada, yada. You get it. He was amazing. Malik Neighbors was amazing. He made Derek Tate look like a genius all offseason. Targeted 18 times on 27 routes. He's getting targeted on 2/3 of his routes. That's just bonkers. And maybe that's a Daniel Jones flaw. Like, I mean, he's locking in on one receiver, but I'll take it. I mean, you're getting that many looks, even if they're inefficient looks. Eventually, you're going to get there. His ADOT was 65% higher this week than last. So they're pushing the ball down the field a little bit. You do love to see that. Marvin Harrison, turns out he's just kind of who we thought he was. Those plays were beautiful. I'm not a scout guy. I'm not a film guy. That's your guys' role. But my goodness, those touchdowns early, the big play, the toe drag, all of it looked legit. I want to see him in the slot a little bit more to get those high percentage looks. But as long as Kyler Murray's playing the way he is, Marvin Harrison's a top 15 receiver, which is exactly what we drafted him as. Brock Bowers, Derek, you were way ahead of the curve here. I didn't think this was going to happen. I definitely didn't think it was going to happen while Devontae Adams was going off. But it turns out Brock Bowers might just be the most reliable pass catcher in this offense right now. He has the most receiving yards for a tight end through 2 career games in this millennium. My man is balling right now. He's caught 15 to 17 targets. Gardner Minshew leads the league in completion percentage. If he's leading the most efficient offense in the world, I get that they're not putting tons of points on the board. They're not the Saints. But if they're going to be efficient, PPR builds, I don't see how you get Bowers outside your comfort zone starting, certainly probably in the top 5.
Theo, I want you to also weigh in on these rookie receivers. And it's about the most New York Giants thing that New York could do, to go for it on 4th down, tie ball game with just over 2 minutes remaining. Daniel Jones throws a nice pass to Malik Neighbors right on the sideline, and he flipping drops it. And then Washington goes down the field and kicks the game-winning field goal as time expires. But the target share percentage of Malik Neighbors, I'm laughing about it because it is laughable. 18 targets, 10 receptions, a big day for Malik Neighbors, and kind of what we expect. He's going to be the featured player in this offense, whether it is taking shots down the field or they used him a lot more underneath, and it also helps playing against that Washington secondary. But Marvin Harrison Jr., and you kind of touched on it last week with his disappointing performance. Who did you think had the more impressive day, and who encourages you a bit more between Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. rest of season after their big week 2 performances?
Marv, because Kyler looks like that guy. And I think 2 weeks in a row, we've seen the Cardinals offense, put up points, 28. I guess it was only 20 week 1 because there was that kick return, or 21. But 2 weeks in a row, they've looked good. Kyler has looked pretty good. And Marv, just like I hoped, was more of a victim of a really good Bills strategy with the safety help and the zone and the light boxes encouraging the run. The Rams weren't able to do any of that. He went off. He was a special prospect. I think that he's in a better offense. I think that he seems a little bit more safe to bet on week to week. Yes, Neighbors just went off with his 18 targets. The week before, I thought he played super well versus the Vikings and Brian Flores. It didn't quite get accounted for on the stat sheet, though, because it was a lot tougher sledding for the Giants than the worst defense in football, I think, in Washington. So I think that Neighbors seems more sustainable than or Harrison seems more sustainable than Neighbors. I'm with you on Brock Bowers, though. I mean, you those numbers are unbelievable. Best start of the millennium is crazy. And on film, I couldn't be more impressed with him. They put him on the weak side in the slot. You're forcing the two high shells because you've got Devontae Adams and just the state of the league right now. That earns him a one-on-one with that will linebacker right in the slot on the backside. He saw a lot of it and was just cooking Simpson over and over again. On those in breakers, there's a lot of zone coverage, and Minshew was able to hit enough of them, and Bowers just catches them. He had an amazing dig route versus Marlon Humphrey, where Humphrey kind of broke on it beautifully, but the way Bowers was able to kind of track the ball and let it pass right in front of Humphrey's outstretched hands and then kind of reach out and snag the ball behind him. I thought that was such a nuanced way to catch the football. He looks like a total natural. Yak is amazing. That feel for zone coverage is amazing. The way to catch the ball. He reminded me a little bit of like a younger Travis Kelce, honestly. Yeah. He looks pretty special, and he was pretty special at Georgia.
That just that got me a little excited. Let's just put it that way. That breakdown there from Theo was perfect. Brock Bowers. So the thing is, some may qualify him as a problem. I would argue that problems have an answer. Brock Bowers is an issue. Like, you just have to find a way to deal with him as an opposing defense. And like, I love that you mentioned Devontae Adams demands that you're going to have to do a lot of too high safety shells, and that's going to leave Brock Bowers underneath to eat. And his route, I think he was an underrated route runner. His ability, he may not have the widest catch radius, Theo, but he's dominant at the catch point. And then you already mentioned this dude as a yak threat. He turns into a running back. And I think the best is yet to come when it comes to him as a player to be able to generate all kinds of yardage after the catch. And if Gardner Minshew is willing to just check it down and dump it down and work underneath with when defenses dictate that is the where to go with the football, clearly Brock Bowers is going to be heavily involved. You mentioned his formation versatility. I think Brock Bowers is here to stay. And as far as my fantasy rankings, Soppe at the tight end position for rest of season, I'm putting him in the top 3. Like, I'm not going to go all the way to top 1. I understand that it's been a slow start for a lot of the big names. Maybe we'll get to them. Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews had another rough game. But I'm putting Brock Bowers in my top 3. Am I crazy at the tight end position side?
I think, and I'm not Soppe, but it's especially crazy because Minshew could have gotten benched in this game and it would have been a perfectly acceptable decision. He was brutally bad in the first half through a extremely horrible pick. He underthrew Devontae Adams later. I was like, oh man, this cannot continue. But they've got half an elite passing offense. They've got such a well-built room of weapons, like from the top down, Tucker, Adams, Myers, Bowers, Mayer. It's just good. Everybody does their own thing. Everybody has a role. And I think they use those players well with one another. And if Minshew continues to play this bad and Bowers is putting up numbers, like how good could he be with if they ever make the move like, I know Minshew to O'Connell isn't a big difference, like who knows what would happen, but it's like I seriously think there's more meat on the bone here because Minshew played terrible and he put up these numbers. I think at some point we could see O'Connell and have it actually go even better. So I'm with you, but that wasn't a question towards me.
No, I'm excited about Brock Bowers too, and it's hard to Soppe. We all thought like, okay, Devontae Adams is still there. He's a target hog, right? Jacoby Myers, I think, is a very underrated receiver, and you called him perfectly last season. So it was kind of, and you had Michael Mayer, who is, was a second round pick and a very good prospect coming out of Notre Dame. So it was kind of like, well, where's Bowers going to fit? But they're making it work. As much as Luke Getsy caught all kinds of flack last year as the Chicago offensive coordinator, he's making it work right now with subpar quarterback play, and Bowers has been a beneficiary of that, and they have found ways to get him the football consistently.
Yeah, they're making it work because he's pseudo the running game. If they ever establish a running game, maybe this changes and the offense is a little more versatile. But behind Zamir White and Alexander Madison, this running game is stuck in the mud. You mentioned the questions at quarterback, and that's the only part that's scaring me from getting there. I've got him at 6 the rest of the season because of the stability of the top 5 at the quarterback position. You're talking Allen, you're talking Mahomes, you're talking Purdy, guys like that. Then we know what they are, who they are. Minshew, he's playing terrible. I agree with you that it could only, you would think, only get better with Aiden O'Connell, but it's better for everybody. O'Connell had eyes for Jacoby Myers. If he soaks up 20% of the targets, Adams is looking at 30%. You start whittling away at a small pie here, and it could get iffy if you switch quarterbacks. But at the end of the day, he's a starter. If you drafted him, it's not like you drafted 2 tight ends, so you're being rewarded on where you drafted him this summer.
So, speaking of trying to reassess and figure out what to do with certain positions, we got to talk about the quarterback position, guys, because when we're taking a look at the current standings, there's one game left in week 2. But as of right now, Baker Mayfield is the quarterback 1 in fantasy football. Derek Carr is the quarterback 2 in fantasy football. And Kyler Murray coming in at number 3, and then Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson at 3, 4, and 5. So, Soppe, what are we to make of the Bucs offense, the Saints offense through the air? I mean, we can certainly have the discussion about Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin had a great game against the Detroit Lions. And then we talk about the Saints and the vertical passing attack. Clint Kubiak has that offense clicking through the first 2 weeks. I was a little skeptical after they, steamrolled the Carolina Panthers in week 1, but doing what they did at Dallas, after what I thought was a great opening performance from the Dallas Cowboys in week 1, Shaheed catches another bomb. Olave was far more involved in week number 2. What are your thoughts? We'll start with the Saints, because we saw Baker go off in week 1. We didn't talk much about Derek Carr, but Derek Carr is going to make us start talking about him if he continues to play like this. What are your thoughts on the Saints offense through the first 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, how could you be? I couldn't say enough good things about the Saints offense. Is he not, like, this is going to come off as hot takey, but how much is a fantasy asset? How different is Derek Carr than Dak Prescott? Like, he's got an alpha receiver. He's got a run game that's going to be inefficient. They're going to put points on the board. He's got more depth at receiver, I'd argue, with Shaheed being the number 2. I'd take him over Dallas's number 2, especially with Ferguson hurt. You've got a ton of options there. He's 30 for 39 this season for 443 yards and 5 scores. He's got the longest streak in the NFL with multiple touchdown passes. Like, he is offering that high floor that forever we thought Dak Prescott would give us, that you kind of need to if you're not going to be a runner. And obviously Carr or Prescott, for that matter, aren't really that option. I don't think they're the greatest offense ever to play the game, which is kind of where they're trending here. But I think there's room for this to kind of be sustainable. I mean, Chris Olave, he has 1 more receiving yard through 2 games than the Saints have points. Like, if you told me they were going bonkers, I would assume it was on the back of Olave. But he's got 92 receiving yards. They have 91 points scored. And you look at this, the most important part here, I would argue you might play him as a starter this upcoming week in 1 quarterback leagues. He's flirting with my top 12. He gets the Eagles. The Eagles are on short rest. You get a guy like Dak. He's playing Baltimore. Stafford's got San Fran. Like, you've got some tough matchups there. He's flirting with the top 12. But when it matters most, down the stretch of the season, he ends the fantasy year with the Giants, the Commanders, the Packers, and the Raiders. There's a chance Derek Carr's best month of production has yet to come.
Wow. Interesting thoughts. Theo, I want to get your thoughts on this Saints passing offense with Clint Kubiak as the offensive coordinator, what we've seen from Shaheed. Right now, Shaheed is a top 10 fantasy wide receiver through the first 2 games of the NFL season. Do you think this is an opportunity to sell high on Shaheed, or do we actually believe that, hey, we may have hit a home run here with Shaheed and an offense that maybe we overlooked entering the 2024 season?
I'm liking what I'm seeing out of the Saints. I think that the engine that drives them is the offensive line, which is kind of the opposite of what everybody was expecting. But when you look at what they've got from Fuaga to Penning and everybody in the middle, it is people who are just perfectly suited to run the Shanahan system. This line has an identity, and it is They can get out and move, and they generate easy power on these wide zones. They can reach you and push you down the field. And off that, everything else falls into place. My concern with Carr and the rest of the Saints offense is the fact that New Orleans has run the ball or passed the ball on only 36% of their plays so far. They are super run heavy through 2 weeks, and their efficiency is just, every time they do pass it, is bonkers good. It's amazing. It's not going to sustain. There are going to be times and games when they need to drop back more than this, and the line gets caved in a little bit more because it's not their strength. But through 2 weeks, there's going to be plenty of teams that struggle with this system. The Shanahan system, it works. They're limiting the pure drop back Carr has to take, and the offensive line has to protect, and they've got the personnel to do it. I think it's not always going to look this good, but it's a good team build, I think, and they have the personnel to fit the scheme, and they know who they are, and yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I had Carr starting in 2 leagues yesterday. I drafted him in my 32-person fantasy league, and I had Jordan Love in another, and he was just sitting out on the waiver wire, and I said, why not? So I've been happy with what I'm getting out of Derek Carr. I think everybody else should join the bandwagon, but at the same time, these first 2 weeks, I don't know if he can quite sustain. But yeah, he's good, and the schedule on the back end definitely is interesting.
Yeah, to watch Alvin Kamara's jump in rushing efficiency, that's something that we all had concerns about, because we saw a back who is, in the back half of his 20s, approaching that age cliff of 30 years old, and we saw the drop in efficiency last year. It was significant. So we had questions about that entering this season. But you mentioned Taliese Fuaga and him being a perfect fit for what they want to do offensively. His lateral movement is insane for a guy that's that size.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So, I mean, it seems as if those issues that they had up front last season have been cured, at least from having the pieces fit together much more ideally there in New Orleans. Let's move to we'll touch on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers real quick. Soppe, are you buying? I mean, Baker Mayfield was under siege because Luke Gadecki was out. No matter what they did with Aiden Hutchinson yesterday, whether they tried to block him one-on-one, they figured out very quickly that that's not going to work. They chipped him. That still didn't work. He got sacked 5 times. But Baker Mayfield still went on the road against a quality opponent and pulled off a win. What are your thoughts on this passing game? And Chris Godwin right now in full PPR formats is a top 3 fantasy wide receiver. His move back to the slot seems to be a great fit for his fantasy value. Is Godwin back in the top 15 conversation on a weekly basis?
I think it's going to be a little hit and miss, because if Baker's not running as hot as the sun, it's going to be a little hard to get 2 guys in the top 15 from any offense for that matter. But if the Dolphins guys are falling back a little bit, there's a little more leeway for a ranking like that. At the very least, you're starting them weekly. We saw this at the end of last season where the efficiency kind of ticked up. It was like it took 2.5 months for Baker Mayfield to get all the deep balls out of his system and kind of figure out what Chris Godwin does well, what Mike Evans does well. And I think we might see it ping pong back and forth, but the fact that he's willing to ping pong back and forth as opposed to just force feed Mike Evans is a huge step in the right direction. 9.7 yards per pass attempt. That's not going to sustain. I don't think he's 2023 Brock Purdy or anything like that. But I mean, he's carrying over form week over week. We're seeing it here. 55 rushing yards this season. That's not nothing. That's something for fantasy managers. And we know he plays in the same division as the Carolina Panthers, who they haven't played yet. And guess what? They get him twice in December. So that's not bad timing when it comes to that. Baker Mayfield in the same conversation as Carr for me, even though I think Carr's a little more sustainable, but not much.
Ooh, I've got them both kind of in that same tier, but I actually think that Baker Mayfield has I'd rather invest in Baker Mayfield, because as much as we talked about Kamara and the running game, I don't think the Buccaneers have that figured out quite yet. Rashad White just picked up a groin injury. So I'm believing that the Buccaneers are probably going to have to rely a bit more on Baker Mayfield than the New Orleans Saints offense is. So that's why I just give a slight advantage to Baker Mayfield. But let's move on to some quick thoughts. Theo, Isaiah Likely, huge week 1, week 2, came back down to earth. We saw a big game from Zay Flowers. What are your thoughts on the tight ends in Baltimore from a fantasy lens after both Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely had, I would say, disappointing performances in week 2?
Yeah, it's just gonna be the way it is. I talked about it after the Baltimore game, where it's like I didn't think Mark Andrews looked washed in that game. I just thought that the Chiefs kind of let these checkdowns to likely kind of beat them, and nice job by Lamar letting the offense flow through that. But that's not going to be how it is every week, especially after Isaiah likely establishes himself as someone that you want to put a body on pretty badly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be up and down depending on the defenses that they play. It's not a clear cut. This guy's going to get all the targets. This guy's going to get all the targets, and so you're going to have to live with the inconsistency. That's true of a lot of tight ends, but yeah, especially them.
Well, the snap count was also something I wanted to take a peek at because Mark Andrews was on the field 74% of the time against Kansas City Chiefs. It dropped down to 63% against Las Vegas, but he still had 5 targets, 4 receptions for 51 yards. Likely's usage from week 1 with 66% of the offensive snaps dropped all the way to 49% in week number 2. Only 3 targets, 2 catches for 26 yards. Soppe and Theo, if you both want to sound off, because I spent pretty much all week saying I worried about Malik Willis and the Packers offense, and lo and behold, they handled business. And Matt LaFleur appeared to have a clear identity and game plan for Malik Willis, Soppe, and it looked like it worked out. What are your thoughts on this Packers offense and the starting debut in a Packers uniform for Malik Willis?
Yeah, you're going to beat yourself up for this one, but I think we learned that the Packers think of Malik Willis the same exact way you do. They had 53 rushing attempts and 14 passes. Come on, man. This isn't 2024 offensive structure here. They benefited from the game flow, all that good stuff. Anthony Richardson struggling all game long. It worked in their favor. It was a perfect storm. You're not going to see that on any kind of consistent basis. And even if you do, I don't know where these passes are going. I'm still not starting any of these Packer receivers. We know that they're versatile. We know that they're a deep unit. But Wicks led them in targets and scored. Dubs led them in yards. And Reed led them in touches. Like, if we can't get any sort of consistency across the board there on a team that's going to throw the ball under 15 times, I don't know how you rank any of these guys inside your top 30, even if you think the talent is deserving of such a rank.
Josh Jacobs, Theo, 32 carries for 151 yards. You like that usage?
I mean, it's why you got him. It was tough to see Aaron Jones walk out the door, one of my favorite Packers of all time. Mr. cannot get tackled behind the line of scrimmage, Mr. Efficiency. He's the GOAT. He can catch the ball. Like, there's nothing wrong with him. But in a game like this, he just isn't the type you want to lean on over and over and over again. Josh Jacobs does have that build. He's got that power. So it was worth it to add him for this type of situation. And my main takeaway, start any running back that you have against the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah.
213 rushing yards allowed last week. I predicted that they would kind of struggle against a guy coming from the same system, Slowick, LaFleur. If they can't defend the wide zone, LaFleur was just going to keep going back to it. And then I was driving. I did not watch a second of this game, I'll be honest. But
it was stressful.
I checked my phone at a gas station and saw that they had 200 rushing yards at halftime. And I was like, well, yeah, there it is. So I don't know what it looked like, but I have a pretty good guess.
Yeah, with Malik Willis under center, Soppe, I'm kind of with you with it when it comes to the Green Bay passing attack. Like I'm going to have a hard time trusting, any of these pass catchers with Malik Willis under center, but I feel confident that Josh Jacobs is the guy that I want to start from this Green Bay offense while Jordan Love is on the shelf and Willis is under center. Speaking of, are you buying any big performances from week number 2? We saw some monster day, Soppe, from Jackson Smith and Jigba. 16 targets, 12 receptions for 117 yards against the New England Patriots. We also saw some encouraging things from Calvin Ridley when Will Levis wasn't busy, throwing the ball, but terrible lateral and turning it over in the red zone. I don't know if you guys caught the Titans head coach, but if you could read lips, he used a 4-letter explicative. What in the blank are you doing? After that turnover. Anyway, thoughts. Calvin Ridley, and then Quentin Johnston, Soppe. Quentin Johnston, 2 receiving touchdowns. He lives. What are your thoughts on some of these, outlier or some of these big performances from, offenses that we don't know if we can trust? Do you trust any of these, high usage, high performers from week number 2 in these offenses?
Yeah, I'll go in reverse order here in 30 seconds. It won't take me long to get through these guys. Quentin Johnston, no, forget it. Justin Herbert, averaged 30 completions per game last September. He's got 31 completions this season. They're not throwing the ball nearly enough. I'm not banking on any of these receivers in a significant way, let alone the guy I think is third in the hierarchy. Calvin Ridley, no, you mentioned it. Will Levis is his quarterback, and Will Levis plays quarterback the way somebody who doesn't know how to hold a video game controller kind of plays Madden. Like, they're just mashing buttons, and sometimes you end up with a lateral when you're not looking at anything and you just throw the ball all over the place. That's how I play video games. That's not how I want my fantasy quarterback to do it. No, Kevin Ridley rolled into the end zone, gets another rushing one. Not worried about it. JSN, yes, I am buying this. Tyler Lockett, nice guy, I'm sure. Great asset, all that good stuff for years. Perennially underrated. The time is over. His yards per route run are pacing down for a third straight season. JSN saw an ADA over 10.5 against the Patriots. That's a tough matchup, and that's something we finally see from the skill set. I don't know if that was under 30 seconds or not. JSN, yes. Kevin Ridley, no. Quentin Johnston, hell no.
Theo, are you in lockstep with kind of the with Soppe's line of thinking with all three of these options?
I am. JSN is cool. He had a great preseason. I thought looked super good. I was wondering if he would kind of break out this regular season. It looks like that just happened. I loved him coming out of the draft. If he's putting up these kinds of numbers against a good Patriots defense, I'm on board. One more guy from week 2 that I'm excited about, Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin, as kind of that change up to Breece Hall. I think that he could be relevant all year. I don't know if he'll have 2 touchdowns every game, but I don't know. I'd be curious what you guys thought, but he was another week 2 breakout that I kind of highlighted and liked his involvement in the receiving and the running game.
I have no idea what the hell to think about that. That was one I did not see coming whatsoever. And not that I thought that Braylon Allen was a bad prospect coming out of Wisconsin. It's just Breece Hall looked like a feature bell cow player, and it made it hard for me to believe that he was ever going to come off the field enough for any other Jets running back to be fantasy relevant. But Soppe, yeah, I mean, is Braylon Allen a thing? Do we see Breece Hall maybe losing a little bit of, maybe 5 to 10 touches a game to Braylon Allen moving forward?
Not meaningful work in terms of raising Allen into the flex conversation or downgrading Hall in the least for me. If we're going to say Jordan Mason is the guy in San Fran, then you could argue that Allen's now the top handcuff. I'll listen to that. Yeah. But, I mean, we saw Breece Hall score on the fade touchdown pass. If Aaron Rodgers is going to have that kind of trust in his lead back, Braylon Allen, nice story, all that good stuff. He should be rostered 100%. But I don't think he's taking meaningful work off the plate of Hall. And so, no, he's not going to be a fantasy starter unless Hall goes down.
Okay. We'll touch on some disappointing performances. One that stands out to me that's not on the show doc, Anthony Richardson. For a guy that a lot of folks had as a potential breakout fantasy performer, rough performance in Green Bay. Caleb Williams, guys. I mean, I know we talked about Bo Nix, potentially finishing as the high, or that was one of my bold takes, that he could finish as the highest scoring fantasy quarterback. Jaden Daniels looks like he has that on lockdown, but he has more fantasy points than Caleb Williams through the first 2 games. And then we're talking about Terry McLaurin. Theo, I definitely want to get your thoughts on some of these disappointing performances. And Michael Pittman's in there because of Anthony Richardson's struggles in week number 2. And then Matthew Stafford, guys. The offensive line has issues. Cooper Kupp got hurt. Puka Nakua's on IR. At some point, the injuries are just going to be too much to potentially overcome there in Los Angeles. We even still see Kyren Williams, who's found the end zone in the first 2 games, but that's really all that saved his fantasy performances because his rushing efficiency is down significantly from what we saw last year because of how banged up this offensive line is. So of all these concerning performances, Theo, who stands out as the most concerning moving forward?
Caleb. I think he looked like Bryce Young a little bit. I thought like the sense of creation that was supposed to be so good, and we saw it at Bryce, right? We saw it from Bryce at Bama, right? He would make everybody miss. His accuracy remained perfect. It seemed no matter the position that he was in or how much he had extended the play. But he gets to the league, the line gets their, stuff kicked in, and that creation ability just doesn't seem as special. And then you didn't draft him to be a pure pocket passer, right? And then you look at Caleb last night, he was lucky to get it out of the game. I thought, like, by the end, I know they were trying to win and they had a chance for it. I wouldn't have blamed them if they just took a knee and shut him down instead of like going on a drive to win the game. It was that bad, and he was taking on that much contact in that fourth quarter. They can't drop back and pass without him getting lit up right now. I don't think he will just be a bust and bad forever. But right now, like Eberflus, Waldron, Caleb, the line, it all is just combining into a team that looks completely dysfunctional right now. If it wasn't for the secondary, the Bears would be in contention for the number 1 overall pick pretty easily. I just think with Keenan banged up, Rome Odunze doesn't quite look like he's on the same page with Caleb at all. The accuracy, the ball just doesn't have a lot of juice leaving Caleb's hands. Like, I don't have anything positive to say about Caleb's performance 2 weeks. He has shown me absolutely nothing. No ability to work the pocket, no ability to create. I'm a little bit worried.
I think Soppe, I want to touch on Caleb Williams because we had conversations about Caleb Williams and being set up to succeed entering day number 1 with, a collection of pass catchers and some explosive playmakers in this offense. Rome Odunze was battling through an injury in his own right, so he doesn't look quite right. Him and DJ Moore don't look like they're on the same page. Soppe, and they're not getting any. Theo mentioned the struggles of the offensive line. Through 2 games, DeAndre Swift has 24 carries for 48 yards at 2 yards per carry. Like, this team can't run the football. They can't seem to protect Caleb Williams, which, he was never a guy that Theo mentioned is you drafting him because you want him to play within structure. Right. And yeah, he's not dynamic enough like a Jaden Daniels to be able to escape pressure consistently at the NFL level. So Soppe, I'm having a hard time making a case to put any Bears wide receiver inside my top 25 for week 3 until further notice. Am I crazy?
No, I mean, at this point, we're treating him kind of like the Packers. He's not as bad as Malik Willis, but he hasn't shown us any kind of stability here. He was my lowest graded quarterback not for fantasy, just as far as metrics go. He was the lowest graded quarterback in week 1, and he's only ahead of Bryce Young so far in week 2. So that's not exactly the company you want to keep here. He's dragging everybody down with him. No Keenan Allen last night hurts, but until we see something, we're seeing quarterbacks kind of fall out of the equation. We've seen Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr move their stock up, and that's kind of coming at the expense of a Caleb Williams, of a Matthew Stafford, who now he's got nothing going with him health-wise. 27 passes to net 216 yards against the Cardinals is unacceptable. I don't care who's there. They've got 2 tough games coming up, 2 tough games down the stretch. So I don't think he needs to be rostered. I think Caleb Williams in a 1-quarterback league, you can move on if you want to.
Yeah, I'm DeAndre Swift too. I mean, the one time the Chicago Bears got near the goal line, guess what? A new team is still allergic to giving him a goal line carry because it was Khalil Herbert who punched it in from, I think, the 2-yard line. So just all kinds of bad right now there in Chicago. So that'll do it for this episode of the PFN Fantasy Podcast. Go ahead and subscribe. Hit the like button. Make sure you click the bell so you get the ding, ding, ding every single time we drop a new bit of video content here on the Pro Football Network YouTube channel. And however you digest your podcast, subscribe, leave us a review. We really appreciate all the love and support. If you're looking for waiver wire rankings, some sleepers, start sit options, you can find all of that over at profootballnetwork.com/fantasy, where myself, Jason Katz, and Kyle Soppe himself are dropping all kinds of analysis entering week 3 and beyond for the 2024 NFL season. For Theo Ash and Kyle Soppe, I'm Derek Tate, and until next time, everybody, later, says the Tater.